Hello and welcome to another video from Dublo Rail. In this video we're going to take a look at what lubricants you could use for lubricating your locomotives. Now there's a lot of videos out there that try to debunk whether or not you should use 3-in-1 oil. 3-in-1 oil is a light mineral oil, and it's been used for all sorts of things like your bicycle, circular saws, shears, sewing machines, and a long time ago it used to be used for lubricating motors on model railway locomotives. However, you'll see some videos out there where they try to debunk that this is actually safe to use on older locomotives. And while you can use it on the metal bearings and so on, it's not a good idea just because the way mineral oil is designed and it's kind of messy. You can quite easily get it on your hands and then transfer it to a body shell on your locomotive. And just to give you an idea of what can happen when and it's quite easy to do it as well. Here is a Esso locomotive. This is an old Wren locomotive. In fact, it's a locomotive I've had since I was about 4 years old. So it's a good, good 38 plus years that I've had it, right? And you can see here, if I move it up closer to camera, you can see here there's some white residue around the cab area. And what happened was, when I was a kid, I went ahead and tried to lubricate this myself by putting a little bit too much oil on the axle here and here. And while I didn't get it on the body shell or on the body shell directly, what happened was I touched it with my thumb, and then I went to go pick up the locomotive, and I got it here and here, and you can sort of see a slightly smaller fingerprint in there. And so what happened is, over those years, it's basically become discolored, and as a result of that particular incident. So where you see folks telling you that this stuff is safe to use, it is, provided you don't get it anywhere on your plastic. And years ago you only had this as a choice. I mean, this was the only choice that you had. But nowadays you have stuff like liquid bearings, which is a plastic safe synthetic lubricant. And now this is a little bit more expensive. It'll run you about somewhere about $12–13 for a container of it, whereas the 3-in-1 oil might cost you about $4 or $5. The difference is I've had this for since about 2012. I bought 2 bottles of it. This is my second bottle. I have a couple hundred locomotives, and I typically lubricate them a little bit every 6 months or so. So in the space of 6 years, I've gone through 2/3 of a bottle because I didn't want to kind of discolor it, so I stopped using it, and maybe a little bit of this bottle as well. So you're cribbing over a couple of dollars or a pound or two when you're dealing with locomotives that are worth considerably more than that. And so you're basically just taking a risk that you don't really need to take. If this gets up on the plastic, it doesn't really matter. Now some people are going to go and probably put in the comments that this isn't the case. So what I decided to do for the rest of this video was actually go through some of the locomotives that I have here. So I've got a Lima dock shunter. I've got another Tri-ang Hornby dock shunter. I've got 2 Wren locomotives, and I'll show you the other Wren locomotive just so you can see it's not anything to do with the plastic. I've got a new Hornby Sentinel. I've got an old Hornby Britannia here. I've got a Dapol Class 68. I've got a this is Aurora, but it's basically a Tri-ang or 351. I believe this is a Class 77. And then I've got the Pullman here as well. And so these are older, obviously various different manufacturers and so on. So the first thing I wanted to go through is probably start, and this is the Tri-ang Railways manual. It's you can see here it's from 1963. from the stamp that's on here. And right here in the middle, it has lubrication and maintenance. And it says here, all Tri-ang Railways locomotives are lubricated before they are packed at the factory. The lubricant may dry out in storage, and it is advisable to examine new locomotives to ensure that they are adequately lubricated before running. Therefore, periodical lubrication may be carried out as required. Place a drop of oil on each of the points indicated on the appropriate diagram. A bottle of suitable oil is provided with every train set. Over-oiling must be avoided. Do not use thick oil or grease, and take care not to allow oil to come in contact with the commutator or carbon brushes. Additional bottles of correct oil are obtainable as spare parts. The axle bearings of all rolling stock should be oiled. It is necessary from time to time to clean the slots between the segments of the commutator, as these accumulate carbon from the brushes. Worn out brushes should be renewed. It may be found that hair or wool will enter the driving mechanism. This should be removed carefully with a pair of tweezers. Tweezers are included in the Tri-ang Railways Toolkit or T288. So you can see here from the diagram where you're supposed to oil and various different things. But the main concern here is not to get oil on the commutator or the carbon brushes. It also came with a special type of oil. So it doesn't say here that you should be using mineral oil. It doesn't say you should be using thick oil. And I have seen things referred to like WD-40 and 3-in-1 as technically being thick, and from some of the more modern instructions. So this is telling you that there's special oil when these things were originally shipped out. So if we move along, we have this here, which is from 1993. And in 1993, you can see here there's this section on lubrication, and it says right here in the center, right, that you should do this. It should not be necessary for 6 months or about 100 plus hours of running time. It says here, use a light machine oil such as 3-in-1. Mineral oils of this type can cause deterioration to certain plastics, including polystyrene, from which locomotive bodywork is made. If any oil should get onto a body, wipe it off with a cotton rag. The plastics used for the gear wheels and underframes are not affected by this oil. The art of lubrication is to get a small amount of oil in exactly the right place. And then you obviously have the standard Hornby sort of tool with the wire paperclip and the small cork. So the most important thing to read here is that Hornby are saying you can use 3-in-1 oil, but you cannot get it on the plastic. And the type of plastic that the body shell is made out of, which is polystyrene based, can actually be deteriorated if you don't get it off properly. And so you can see here from this Ren loco, that's what you're possibly looking at, is some discoloration. And it's also important to use it in small amounts. And this is from 1993. So what's interesting is this one is from 3 years prior. It's from 1990, and I believe this was for the Class 91. And as Dave over at Dean Park Station will tell you, that's the last time the 91 was actually retooled. So here it says you can use 3-in-1 light machine oils such as 3-in-1 strictly according to these instructions. Mineral oils of this type, while excellent for lubricating, can cause deterioration to certain plastics, including polystyrene, from which locomotive and tender bodies are made. Therefore, if any oil should get onto the body, wipe it off gently with a cotton rag. The plastics used for gear wheels and underframes are not adversely affected by this oil. And then it goes on to tell you about the oiling tool and so on. So it also gives you a couple of different tips down here. It says, do not get oil on the commutator. It will soften the carbon brushes and impair the efficiency of the motor. It says, ensure that the track and locomotive wheel rims are entirely free from oil. Never handle equipment with oily hands. And remember, oil is only required when two moving parts are actually in contact. If you can see oil, there is usually too much. So again, we're going back to this. You can use a 3-in-1, but you can't actually get it on the plastic parts except for the gear wheels, which are designed from a different type of plastic. It also says you shouldn't handle it with oily hands. So So this here is a set of instructions from the Pendolino train set, and interestingly enough, it says down here that you should not oil the motor. It also says a light machine oil such as 3-in-1 can be used, but please use caution as mineral oils of this type can cause deterioration to the plastic from which Hornby locomotive bodies are manufactured. Immediately wipe off with a cotton rag any oil which gets onto the locomotive body. So I think we've established at this point that the myth, as some people would call it, about the plastic on the body shell being deteriorated by mineral oil has actually come from Hornby and Tri-ang. And so there's probably a reason for that. They know the type of plastic that's gone into manufacturing their product. So obviously, there's a risk associated with using 3-in-1 oil. Now, if you want to take that risk and you can make sure you don't get it on the body, that's all great. However, for people giving advice to folks on YouTube and in forums, not everybody has the skill set to go and do this. So for them, it might make more sense to spend an extra £2 or £3, buy something that's a lot easier and a lot safer to use, and not destroy their expensive locomotives. Just one thing to keep in mind when you're handing out advice. So the other thing is Lima, right? So I've heard different things about Lima. So what's interesting about Lima is it says here their locomotive maintenance, they actually tell you to clean the track. And they tell you to keep it clean and dust free by wiping with a soft cloth moistened with a light little methylated spirits. This is kind of interesting because when I was a kid, my dad would always clean the track with a small amount of methylated spirits. He also told me not to touch the body shell or any of the plastic parts with 3-in-1 oil, and obviously not to use too much of it. And what's interesting here, it says do not oil the brushes or the commutator. Again, it's same advice that Hornby gave, but I also tell you here to use the part, aside from misspelling locomotives, they tell you they should clean the drive wheels periodically with a light abrasive paper. Now I've seen some of the older Tri-ang locos, people used to clean them with metal brushes. So what you do is you apply some voltage to the metal brush and touch the wheels and it would spin around. You may be able to do the same thing with the Lima. I don't think you should do this with the newer locomotives. I think the newer wheels are a different type of metal, and you'll end up scratching them up and taking the coating off of them rather than actually cleaning them. Now what's interesting here, and this is by the way for a Lima Class 87, it says here for lubrication that all components of Lima motors are self-lubricating and do not require any lubrication. I don't know if that's still the case 30, 40 years on, but according to the instructions, you're not supposed to ever lubricate a Lima motor. So moving along to Dapol, or Dapol. One interesting thing, this is an older Dapol Royal Scot instruction set, and the thing that caught my attention with this was that it says down here, it is advisable not to store the locomotive in direct sunlight as livery colors may fade and prolonged periods may cause permanent body damage. So that kind of makes you wonder if the older Dapol locomotives are subject to UV radiation that you get from the light. But anyway, what's interesting about lubrication for this older loco from Dapol, it says here that proper lubrication is most important but should never be overdone. It says a suitable lubricant for use in your locomotive is Daewat model railway oil, formerly Walker's, available from most model shops. On no account must mineral-based oil be brought in contact with plastic parts. So again, this is another manufacturer telling you not to get mineral oil on the plastic parts. Yeah, we have some people debunking this and trying to say that it's okay. It's not really. Ensure no oil gets onto the carbon brushes or onto the commutators. So again, same advice from this manufacturer. Now we've got 3 manufacturers telling us not to get oil on the carbon brushes or the commutators. So that's Lima, Hornby, and now Dapol. And again, not to get it on the plastic parts. It also says here that you can apply easiest way to apply oil is with a fine paintbrush. and it tells you to oil the axles, coupling rods, and so on. And so what I'll do is on the website I'll scan in some of these instructions so people can take a closer look. So moving on to some stuff that's a little more modern. This is a Heljan, I think this is the Metropolitan Railway Bobo. This is one for the transport of London. And so it says here, a powerful 3-pole motor and heavy die-cast chassis ensure haulage capacity that will meet most modelers' demands. And then it goes telling you how to run it in, and it says, please ensure that all gear, bearings, axles are lubricated. This has been undertaken during manufacture, but periodic cleaning and light relubrication using plastic-compatible oils and greases is suggested. It says good electric continuity is essential for smooth and reliable operation, and tells you to make sure your track's clean as well. So here, the most important thing is they're saying to use plastic-compatible oils, like liquid bearings. However, we've also been told by 3 different manufacturers now that 3-in-1, which is a mineral-based oil, is not plastic safe, at least for the type of plastic the model railway bodies are made out of. My guess is Heljan probably uses a similar injection mold system as everybody else, and so you probably don't want to risk using that oil on your expensive Heljan locomotive. And just to show you that it isn't just a one-off, this is for the Class 76, and somewhere down here, let's see, it says the same thing here. It says this has been undertaken during manufacture, but periodic cleaning and light relubrication using plastic-compatible oils and greases is suggested. And again, plastic-compatible oils is the term that's used there. So what do Bachmann have to say about this? So this is the Class 44, 45, 46 peak instructions. And if I flick this over, it tells you general. And let's see. Yeah, so up here it says, when required, sparingly lubricate the motor bearings using plastic-compatible light oil and the train gear with model grease. So there it tells you that you can basically use model grease for the train gear and plastic-compatible light oil for the motor bearings. So Bachmann are going one step further and telling you they want you to use model grease, which is specifically designed for locomotives, with the gearing, and I assume that's because they don't want you to run the risk of that gearing becoming damaged by mineral oil. And if I look at this, which is for the Class 70, it says basically the same thing. It says, when required, sparingly lubricate the motor bearings using plastic-compatible oil and the gear train with model grease. So once again, that looks to be a standard recommendation from Bachmann. Now there's some other things that I thought I'd show you. So for example, this is for a Hornby OR 3283, which I think, I can't remember what it's for now. But this one is from, I think, 2012 maybe. But it says here, which is interesting, this is for an 040 locomotive, and it says, although locomotives are lubricated before dispatch from the factory, the lubricant can dry out during storage. It says lubrication should be carried out at approximately 6 months and 6 monthly intervals, or every 100 hours of running time. It says do not oil the motor. Again, it tells you can use 3-in-1. It tells you that it can cause deterioration to the polystyrene plastic from which Hornby locomotive bodies are manufactured. Immediately wipe off with a cotton rag any oil that gets on the locomotive body. And it has a couple of instructions for lubrication down here. So you can see there, it's got the gear in between the it says to put 1 or 2 drops on the worm gill, which is M right here, on the coupling rods and on the axles. And again, it repeats, do not oil the motor. So it's important to look at the instructions because you may have a couple of different Hornby models that tell you different things. It says here, this is now for a Princess Coronation class, which is 462. And this one tells you The motor is fitted with a sealed long life motor which requires no maintenance. After a considerable amount of use, the motor may require replacement and should be carried out by a Hornby service dealer. It says here for lubrication, although the locomotive was lubricated during manufacture, the lubricant can sometimes dry out in storage. Lubrication should be carried out at approximately 6 monthly intervals or every 100 hours. And then it tells you that the instructions for lubrication are in the middle here, which you can see here. All the various moving parts, all the axles. It also tells you up here, only apply small drops of light machine oil to the places marked in red, and it tells you to make a dropper. And it says immediately wipe off excess oil, especially from the loco body, and only lubricate moving parts. What's interesting is this particular one does not tell you that it will damage the body. So maybe newer locomotives from Hornby, they have changed the plastic. We will have to find out. So this is from a class 395. Again, it tells you to lubricate every 100 hours. Again, it's a sealed 5-pole motor that doesn't need any lubrication. And it tells you various different points here. And again, it doesn't tell you that you need to worry about deterioration, but it tells you that you should immediately wipe off excess oil, especially from the locomotive body. So I'm wondering if maybe Hornby's legal department have changed the wording on this, just so if people, see something wrong with the loco, don't go off and try to claim under warranty. We'll have to check into that some more. And finally, this is a newer Dapol set of instructions. This is for the class 68, which you can see right here. And it tells you about running in, tells you about, I think, maintenance down here. So it says here, we have designed the model using components which require little maintenance. However, we suggest that after every 100 hours, running a lubrication service is performed using light synthetic lubricating oil such as Dapol or LocoLube. It says here, mineral oil types or thicker oil types may damage your locomotive and or invalidate your warranty. It says, do not overoil. Over-oiling may damage paint finishes and or cause buildup of dust. It says, remove surplus oil using a lint-free cloth. It says, regularly check your model for buildup of dust or loose synthetic materials around moving parts. Okay, so what have we learned so far? So far we've learned that when these locos originally came out from Tri-ang, they were shipped with their own special type of oil. We see that in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, Hornby recommended using mineral oil, but told you not to get it on the body because it will cause deterioration and damage. And it also told you to wipe it off immediately. Up until present day, they're telling you if you get any kind of oil on the body, you need to wipe it off. Heljan, Bachmann, and Dapol are telling you that you should use a synthetic oil, and Bachmann are telling you that on their drivetrains you should be using model grease. But I think you can probably get away with using liquid bearings, but maybe not. And I'm guessing that could be because material like synthetic oil might not lubricate properly when it's placed over the existing grease. I think liquid bearings will dislodge the existing grease, so it should work okay. But that's up to you for what you want to do. So there's been some videos that have said that this is a myth, right? Using 3-in-1 oil will cause, your plastic to deteriorate. That's not true. Well, it turns out, you can see here from this Wren locomotive, when I was a kid, got some 3-in-1 oil on it, and you can see there's some discoloration. The plastic, it's still smooth, but you can see there the white parts and so on. It has eaten away at the plastic over time, or at least discolored it. Here's another Wren locomotive, same thing, about the same age. You can see there it's not damaged at all. Now when I was a kid, I dumped too much oil here, and here, and it got on my hand, and I handled the loco like that when I was putting it back on the track, and I got oil all over it. And of course, even though despite cleaning it off pretty much right away, it still managed to permeate the body shell there and cause some discoloration. However, 3-in-1 oil has a very distinctive smell, so if I smell the bottom of these locos, all of the Tri-ang stuff that I have was originally lubricated with 3-in-1 oil. And you can see here, these have nylon gear wheels. Now these used to be a problem with these disintegrating and breaking and stuff, and that may be where that myth came from, or at least people thinking that you couldn't use 3-in-1 on the motor body parts. But as you saw there from the Tri-ang instructions and from the Hornby instructions, they're saying that these motor bogies and the underframe can handle 3-in-1 oil, although to be honest, I wouldn't take the risk. You can see here later on, Hornby actually replaced those nylon gear wheels with metal ones, and these are brass. It's also worth noting that Tri-ang originally released these locomotives with their own oil, so that might be another thing to take into consideration. You can see from Dapol are telling you that not to use mineral oil, that will damage the plastic and it will damage your paintwork and void your warranty. So you have a couple of things that you can consider now. You can buy your 3-in-1 oil and continue using it, but there's a bit of a risk there. If you're an experienced modeler, you can go for it, but you might make a mistake, apply it to your Dapol loco, especially like a class 69 here that's well over 100 pounds. You might not want to invalidate your warranty, especially since they have a really good warranty program. So yes, I mean, picking up the liquid bearings is probably your best option, and maybe some mall grease if you have a Bachmann locomotives. Alright, so I wanted to do this video mainly because I had seen a couple of folks post videos over the last year or so claiming that this was just a myth, and I knew as a kid, my dad always told me not to touch the locomotive body shells with the oil. And so I also remember the older Tri-ang locos having these little oil capsule things that my dad used to have, and they kind of look like gel caps. I remember kind of almost look like those cod liver oil kind of yellow kind of gel capsules, and I always remember joking around, knowing that I shouldn't eat them. So I thought I would show you guys a little selection of locos, show you the instructions, and maybe finally put to bed exactly what you should be using to lubricate your locomotives. There's one other thing I wanted to point out. I know in one of the videos, I think it was done by Budget Model Railways or something like that, the guy put 3-in-1 oil quite liberally on an old kind of Hornby locomotive, I think it was, but then he immediately sprayed it down with WD-40. And so one thing I noticed was that WD-40 actually will clean up 3-in-1 oil. So if you look at the some of the purposes or things that WD-40 will do, is it will actually clean as well as lubricate and loosen and so on. And so if you've ever worked on a car and like that, you may have used WD-40 to clean off various parts and so on. So having dumped 3-in-1 oil on the loco and then immediately sprayed it with WD-40 really kind of was counterintuitive, because rather than showing the 3-in-1 oil or WD-40 would actually sort of still work on a locomotive, they actually just basically cleaned off the 3-in-1 oil, so the test really wasn't really accurate. So hopefully we've shown you what the manufacturers recommended. A little bit of history and some research was done. As you can see, Tri-ang originally shipped those locos with their own oil, and you can see that this liquid bearing stuff, which I highly recommend, you can get it off eBay. I think it's pretty cheap. And like I said, I'm on my second bottle since like 2012, 2011. So this stuff lasts forever, and like I said, I had a couple hundred locomotives. So Alright, well that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm sure some folks will have some interesting comments given the subject matter, so please feel free to put that in the comments below. If you liked the video, go ahead and like it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I noticed that about 90% of my views are coming from non-subscribers. So if you get a chance, hit the subscribe button and you can see future videos. And obviously they have a little bell thing now. So if you're a subscriber and you haven't got that bell thing activated, it'll notify you when we kick out a new video. Alright, so that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until next time.